Hey, it's Les from the TV Dudes. This week, we're lucky enough to have a tag team interview. Both halves of the Beatdown Biddies sat down with me separately and talked about their hilarious wrestling duo on Netflix's Glow, their transformation into the Toxic Twins, and more. This time, we talk with Kimmy Gatewood, who plays Stacy on Glow. We talk about her improv background, how great it is to work with friends, as well as her time spent behind the camera directing short films and television episodes. She also dabbles in a little something called podcasting, and we discuss that. It's a really fun interview, and I hope you enjoy.
Hey, Les.
Thanks so much for taking out the time today. I really appreciate it. I got to talk to Rebecca just not too long ago. And so this is just...
perfect. Yay. You get the other half of the story, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I get to talk to the other biddy, and one of the other Apple sisters.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. The other toxic twin, the other half of my brain.
So can you tell me a little bit about not just getting from, being a kid in Maryland who likes being funny or wants to move into entertainment to taking that professional step of having to, tell people, hey, I'm really going to do this instead of whatever you think a career is. Mm-hmm. And then really pushing forward onto, writing your own stuff, doing the Apple Sisters. Can you kind of walk me through what helped get you over that?
Yeah.
That I've got to do this.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much for knowing I'm from Maryland. I love being from Maryland. Basically when college was kind of a defining moment for me, because you have to figure out what you want to do. I had done the Renaissance Festival in Maryland and had done my high school theater and knew that it was an option, and definitely took some trips to New York and saw a lot of movies that I wanted to be in, and always dreamed of being on Saturday Night Live. Was probably the biggest driver for me. I was like, I know I can do that. So when I went to college, I had gotten my two choices were either to go to Syracuse or to University of Maryland. I would have gone to University of Maryland to study biomedical engineering, or I would have gone to Syracuse for theater. And what I told myself, if my audition was good enough to get into a school like Syracuse, I was gonna do it. I'm sure to my parents' chagrin, but that was a big defining moment for me, is majoring in theater and acting and figuring out, learning the craft, I think was important. And then after that, I moved to New York City and started auditioning. And I think the toughest transition for me was just recognizing the enthusiasm and passion and desire doesn't always match up with the immediate opportunities when you're starting out. Yeah. You kind of see yourself as auditioning for Broadway shows and getting called back and being able to do it. And the hard truth is that you have to prove yourself as a performer. And a lot of times you don't get a lot of stage time being just an actor. So that's when I got into comedy, which is something I dabbled with. But when I started going to comedy shows at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York and seeing live comedy shows at the Luna Lounge and the Gershwin Hotel, I started to realize and recognize that this is another path of getting in front of people and sharing my ideas. So I started taking classes at the UCB and doing a little bit of live comedy variety shows. And that's where I really found my community of creators. And looking back, I can definitely see how that how important it was to be in that community and that like acting is an awesome craft when you can truly dive into it, but when you're making stuff, you are suddenly empowered to tell the stories you want to tell, be the characters you want to be. So that was probably the thing that got me on the path I am today. And through that, you know, met Rebecca and Sarah Lowe from the Apple Sisters. Was still auditioning, but doing a lot of live comedy. And we got to the point where we were at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival in Montreal, which totally changed our lives. And that year was 2008 was a crazy year because we did Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. I had made a documentary film, which mirrors, I think, my acting path in the way that I was like, I want to make a movie, and then you realize it's impossible to make a movie in Hollywood sometimes. So YouTube had just kind of come out, and cameras were getting less expensive. So my friend and I picked a subject. His name is MC Frontalot. He's a nerdcore hip-hop artist. He raps about the internet and Dungeons and Dragons. And he was going on his first national tour. We had 2 cameras. We taught ourselves how to taught ourselves how to record sound, edit, produce, and we made a documentary that premiered in South by Southwest in 2008. So I got a real do-it-yourself kind of vibe last.
Well, I would imagine that same kind of finding your group, at UCB on the actor side would pay off when you decided to step behind the camera as well on things like Control and the trailer that I've seen for Consent and what Rebecca told me of the budget. I can't believe how good that looks for I think 12 grand, I think she said, or so. That can you talk a bit about moving behind the camera? I definitely get it from if you want to prove yourself with screen time or stage time, you're going to have to figure out how to get on screen yourself. But what was it like moving behind the camera and getting to take, no pun intended, more control over the decisions of the story, of the actual narrative, and then all of the additional decisions that you may not realize fall under your purview now?
Yeah, as a DIYer, I guess I'll call myself self-starter. I, have been doing directing since I was a wee one, from organizing my cousins to do a performance of Opposites Attract and Don't Worry, Be Happy for my aunts and uncles, to directing in college, to as a comedian. You are a completely independent operation, so you kind of do all the jobs, and a lot of times I would kind of have the job of the director. I decided to move when I moved to LA after the documentary. I was still pursuing acting, and then I realized I was working in digital. I worked at Maker, Hulu, Jash, Awesomeness, like I don't know if you're familiar with those companies, but they are kind of like a part of this like digital revolution that was happening, which is still happening. But I realized that I could get things made and done by kind of leaning into that. And I never really considered myself a director until somebody said, you should direct this and call yourself a director, because you just kind of do everything when you're on these small budgets, So my husband's a director too, and he couldn't do this job. And it was this pilot for Comedy Central and a digital series. And he was unavailable, and he said, you should do this. And I was about 6 months pregnant at the time. And I directed this pilot called Junketeers, and that got picked up for series. And then I did another pilot called Hyperlinked that was also sold to series. And I said, you know what? Maybe this is where I should be. And I realized that if I wasn't getting the roles that I wanted to play or seeing the stories that I wanted to see, you're often told as an actor, I'm sure you've talked to tons of actors, but you're told, you're too young, you're too old, you're too funny, you're not funny enough, you're this, you're that, the other. That I decided that I was tired of playing girlfriends or wives or moms that were just there to say okay and get behind the camera and advocate for the stories and the kind of characters that I would want to play. And that role is, for me, the director.
I know where the origin of the podcast comes from now, of being 6 months pregnant and got nothing going on. Might as well direct a pilot. But can you talk a bit about Mother of All Shows?
Yeah. Well, this will be my second podcast. The Apple Sisters had a podcast on Earwolf, which was a ton of fun. And we worked with a lot of awesome comedians. And so the Mother of All Shows is, we had originally, my producing partner, Jen Perry-Leamy, and we pitched this as a TV show. And then, and at the time, some networks were, it's an anthropological look at motherhood, right? Because when I have a 4.5-year-old now, but when I became a mother, I was overwhelmed by the amount of books and, to be quite frank, the internet in general. I felt like every path was leading me to, I'm going to kill my child. So I started a real life moms group that approached motherhood with humor and, science, obviously, and facts, but just like a support system. And I became really interested. I started asking, well, why do, when did breastfeeding become a stigma? And I thought, well, do pigs or horses, do they get side eye from other animals that they're breastfeeding their kid too long, not long enough? So that's where kind of the origin of the podcast started. And I had my friends over at Erios Network, Amanda Lund. They were just starting out, and they said, we're looking for a show that deals with parents. And I was like, I have something. And so it's been a really great relationship. And their podcast network is By Women for Everyone. And this will be the very first podcast about motherhood. And I hope that mothers and parents will feel a little less judged after watching it, or at least have a safe space to be like, yeah, why the heck do people why does everybody, who invented a wipes warmer? Because that is some garbage that somebody's trying to sell me.
Oh, that's great.
And to go back to your question about the benefits of knowing people in low budget, right? Or when you have a low budget project, the benefits of knowing people a little bit. I can talk about that a tiny bit. I think obviously coming from comedy and coming from acting, and a community, it truly takes a community to put these small budget things together. And if you can create an environment where people are feeling artistically fulfilled and, a messaging like control or consent, it feels really good when, you have to go, you realize when you're acting for television, you're basically the entertainment between commercials. It's nice to sometimes, even if it's low budget and you have to stay a couple hours extra, it's worth it to truly do something for art's sake. And when you're surrounding yourself with a great community of people who are nice and just share those desires, I think that's the benefit of coming from a scrappy comedy world and independent film.
Can you talk a little bit about getting to be Hillary Clinton in an epic rap battle and what that was like? Speaking of fun people or what I assume was fun people to be around.
Thank you so much for knowing, Glenn. That was a trippy time because we really thought the election was going the other way.
Yeah.
But I played Marilyn Monroe. So we had met with Robbie Mook and like Hillary Clinton's team, which was so cool.
Oh, that's great.
I felt like I was doing some secret service operation. We met at like a vegan restaurant somewhere, and I was like, "Oh, neat!" Like they were like, "What do like kids respond to?" Like I don't know, rap videos and funny costumes. But it was obviously totally awesome, and my relationship with Epic Rap Battles obviously going from Marilyn Monroe to Hillary Clinton. I was like, yes, smart, strong, beautiful women. Yeah, it was very strange, and it's strange to go back and watch that now because I get a little, I get some chills. But the great thing about those guys, Lloyd and Pete, is that they really do have like they can express their opinions, but they write great, funny jokes, and they like basically take the wind out of everyone who they're kind of. They take the pomp and the circumstance out of people and just be like, you know what, if they did had to rap, what would they rap about? So, but we did see some of that real life rapping in the debates. So.
I know if the Humpty Dance comes on the radio or something, I still know all the words to that. There's half of the 90s that, I may not remember algebra, but I do know a lot of, random song lyrics. And do you find yourself still in the shower going, oh God, why do I have half a verse of Marilyn Monroe or half a verse of Hillary Clinton in my head?
I do. It's funny, the Epic Rap Battle fans are amazing. They are so cool, and they have such great artwork that they put together. But then when one of them comments or like say like, whose rap flows the dopest, Marilyn Monroe's, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. It's stuck in my head for like 2 weeks.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for chatting with me about all of this today. I can't wait to watch Glow drop next week and get to see you be, I guess, the Toxic Twins now.
Well, you know what? Beatdown Biddies are going to make a comeback, and then there's going to be a big switch up. So everybody get ready for that.
Seeing the arc in season 2 of the stolen moves on a couple of levels, stealing from each other, stealing from the guys, it made for such a fun subplot, and I was so happy to see it bring y'all in a little more. Yeah,
and you know what? Our plot line with Arcee continues on into this season, so it's pretty exciting. I have to say, I was very disappointed in Stacey and Dawn. I was like, I can't believe they're doing this, but as like a viewer, you're like, oh yeah, this is what I came for.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, and I can't thank you enough. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
The TV Dudes is an independently run podcast and a member of the Electric Sweater Podcast Network. We are exclusively listener-supported. If you'd like to help us out, go to patreon.com/TVDudes. You can like us on Facebook and Twitter @TV Dudes. All the music for our show is by our friend and original TV dude, Gregory J. Amani Smith. To find out more about us, go to thetvdudes.com and electricsweater.com. I'm Grant Davis. Thanks for listening.